Our top story. The United Nations Security Council has finally passed a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. Israel's longtime ally, the United States, chose to abstain from vetoing the resolution. Experts say this highlights an all-time low of ties between U.S. President Joe Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu during the war. Soon after the vote, Netanyahu abruptly scrapped a visit by a senior Israeli delegation to Washington. The aim of the meeting was to discuss Israel's planned offensive in Rafah. According to Netanyahu's office, the failure of the United States to veto the resolution is a clear retreat from its previous position and will hurt Israel's war efforts. The threat of an offensive in Gaza's Rafah has increased tensions between the United States and Israel. Experts claim if the crisis is not managed carefully, it is only going to continue to worsen with time. The suspension of the meeting in Washington also jeopardizes U.S. efforts to tackle the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. At the same time, it puts a major obstacle in the way of Biden administration to get Netanyahu to consider alternatives to a ground invasion of Rafah. Biden's decision to abstain from UN voting also appears to reflect growing U.S. frustration with Netanyahu. Earlier this month, Biden said that a Rafah invasion will be a red line. However, he added that U.S. is not going to cut off military aid to Israel. Netanyahu dismissed Biden's criticism and vowed to press forward in Rafah. On the other hand, both the leaders are dealing with political pressures. In November, Biden will face his Republican rival Donald Trump as he aims for another term in the White House. The U.S. president faces pressure not just from America's allies, but from a growing number of fellow Democrats as they call to limit Israel's offensive in Gaza. At the same time, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is facing domestic challenges of his own. Far-right coalition members are demanding a hard line against Palestinians. He is also facing growing calls from hostages' families to bring back their loved ones, and the frequent protests calling for Netanyahu's resignation adds to his problem. For the latest on this, our correspondent Jody Cohen has sent us this report from Ranana. Let's listen in.
So Hamas praised the resolution which calls on all parties to ceasefire for Ramadan. Then it fired rockets at Israel and appeared to reject the hostage release deal. And Hamas head Haniyeh is now heading to Iran for meetings. Now, Israel suggested that the vote gives Hamas hope that the international pressure will lead to a ceasefire without them having to release the hostages. Prime Minister Netanyahu has called off the Israeli delegation that was going to Washington, and his office said that the US has abandoned their policy in the UN, which was to link calling for a ceasefire to the release of the hostages. Now, the US has said there's no shift in policy, the resolution is non-binding, that Hamas could achieve an immediate ceasefire by accepting the hostage release deal. And the White House reportedly sees the cancellation of the Israeli delegation as being for Netanyahu's domestic audience. But many Israelis view the US's vote as motivated by the US election, and some commentators have suggested that the US move has emboldened Israel's enemies.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.